is one or two. Or we're not.
Oh, lucky you. Alrighty. All right. If we are all ready to begin, I will go ahead and call to order the Tuesday, November 15th regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. Ms. Strickland, if you would please lead the pledge in the room, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, if we could rise to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if we could now just go to the township manager, Ms. Martin, and she could let us all know how to best participate in this hybrid meeting and do a roll call of board members.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the public, staff, and the Board of Supervisors for joining us this evening for the November 15th Board of Supervisors meeting. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend online using the Zoom platform or in person in the main meeting room. If you are joining the Zoom meeting tonight and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak when the chairwoman calls on you. Prior to commencing this meeting, I have just a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending the Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. Finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate when your name is called. Ms. Steneni?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a
Thank
quorum.
you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, next up is the swearing in of Corey Gracie Griffin as the at-large board supervisor. And I'm remote, unable to be there because I'm sick, and I apologize, but I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Martin to turn it over to the judge, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So this evening we do have on the agenda the swearing-in ceremony of Mr. Corey Gracie Griffin. And tonight joining us we have Judge Katie Oliver with us this evening. If you would please meet at the podium here. Thank you.
I have asked him for some assistance with holding to your Bible. Raise your right hand, please. I, Corey Gracie Griffin,
I, Corey Gracie Griffin,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth
and the ordinances of the Township of Ferguson,
and the ordinances of the Township of Ferguson,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office as Township Supervisor
that I will discharge the duties in my office of Township Supervisor
with fidelity,
with fidelity,
that I have not paid or contributed
that I have not paid or contributed
or promised to pay or contribute,
or promised to pay or contribute,
either directly or indirectly,
either directly or indirectly,
any money or other valuable thing
any money or other valuable thing
to procure my appointment,
to procure my appointment,
except for necessary and proper expenses
except for necessary and proper expenses
expressly authorized by law.
expressly authorized by law,
That I have not knowingly violated any election law of this Commonwealth
that I have not knowingly violated any election law of this Commonwealth,
or procured it to be done by others on my behalf.
or procured it to be done by others on my behalf,
That I will not knowingly receive directly or indirectly
that I will not knowingly receive directly or indirectly
any monies or other valuable thing
any monies or any other valuable thing
for the performance or non-performance
for the performance or non-performance
of any act or duty pertaining to my office,
of any act or duty pertaining to my office,
other than the compensation allowed by law.
other than the compensation allowed by law.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We both have a document to sign here, making it truly official. Okay, he's official. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the board, Mr. Gracie Griffin.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we have citizens' input for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any input for items not on the agenda? I'm seeing none on the Zoom. Is there any in the room?
None in the room.
Okay. Oh, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the November 1st, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
This is Patty. I move to approve the November 1st regular meeting minutes.
Thank you. Do I second?
And I'll second. This is Jeremy.
Thank you. Any concerns, corrections? Okay, many thanks to our recording secretary again. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we'll move on to our authorities, boards, and commissions reports. Tonight we have the University Area Joint Authority. Our representatives on that authority are Wes Glebe and Mark Kunkel, and I believe that it is Mr. Glebe giving the report this evening. Welcome, Mr. Glebe, and thank you.
Well, this is Wes Glebe speaking, and I have a very exciting report tonight. And this comes from the top. I didn't invent this. This is from Corey. Number 1, Scott Road Pump Station Replacement. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? The project consists of replacement of the pump station and the entire force main to Research Drive and an extension of the force main to Bristol Avenue. The force main has been completed by UAJA personnel. The pump station installation is nearly complete. An electrical component has been repeatedly delayed, but is finally installed. The pump station was tested November 9th, and the final piping to connect the new station to the interceptor sewer will be complete before Thanksgiving. The backup generator is still delayed. The old pump station will be the backup until the generator arrives. Now, this next item is really amazing. The UAJA is going to switch to ozone disinfection. Currently, the UAJA uses ultraviolet light for the final disinfection of the water that goes to Spring Creek. UV disinfection is energy intensive. Ozone will not only reduce the energy requirements, but also provide enhanced disinfection and destruction of pharmaceutical and endocrine disruptors. The contract has been awarded. Equipment delivery delays are pushing the completion date to May of 2023. The ozone building and the associated in-ground concrete tank are under construction and progressing rapidly and will be ready long before the arrival of the ozone equipment. The next point is important and integral to the way UAJA supports itself financially. The ozone system will reduce annual operating expenses by $110,000 based on 2021 electric rates. Number 3, anaerobic digester and sludge dryer. This project will replace the current composting system with a digester and sludge dryer. The digester will produce biogas, which can be sold or used, and the buyers are already lined up, or used at the treatment plant as a substitute for fossil fuels. The Center Region municipalities have approved an Act 537 plan special study for the project. A delay in the design has been caused by the determination that the existing compost building cannot be used in the project because of corrosion and potential weakening of structural members. 2 smaller buildings will replace the compost building, which will result in a lower carbon footprint. UAJA and the Center County Recycling and Refuse Authority are collaborating on including organics recycling in the project. The organics from CCRRA could potentially be separated and brought to UAJ for recycling and into biogas. The recently passed Inflation Reduction Act appears to have created an opportunity for receiving a tax credit for much of the project. The tax credit can be sold to obtain a partial rebate for the cost of the project. Since this could result in significant savings on the cost of the project, the bid is being delayed until the IRS publishes the rules for the tax rebate. UAJA anticipates a bid in January 2023. Pennsylvania recently added a grant program through the Commonwealth Financing Authority -COVID-19 ARPA H2OPA, which the UAJA is pursuing, which may further reduce the local share of the project if UAJA is successful. Upon completion of the project, will reduce annual operating expenses by $500,000 per year. Plus, it's obviously capturing the methane, which the composting process didn't. So it's a step ahead for the environment too. Meeks Lane Act 537 plan special study. This project is on hold based on the pending development of tough trees. The special study is being revised to include an alternative which will serve that development as well as require less electricity. Number 5, sheep in the solar array. UAJA has contracted for vegetation management at the solar array. The grass will be mowed with a herd of sheep. It has been. This is a more environmentally friendly method of managing the vegetation. The sheep have finished their growing season at UAJA and have been moved to winter quarters. The program is quite successful. Number 6, rate dispute with State College Borough. UAJA has filed a complaint in the Court of Common Pleas of Center County asking for the court to declare State College Borough's withholding of partial payment unlawful. In 2021, UAJA completed a rate study and adopted the rate in November 2021 to be effective January 1st, 2022. The Pennsylvania Municipalities Authorities Act states that any customer that question the reasonableness or uniformity of the rates are to file a suit in the Court of Common Pleas. The borough has chosen instead to withhold full payment and pay based on the volumetric rate they paid in 2021. To date, the borough has withheld more than $600,000. The borough's withholding, if it continues through the end of 2022, is likely to affect UAJA's debt service coverage ratio. If the ratio falls below 1-to-1 in any year, the UAJA is required through the revenue bond indenture to raise rates for all customers. We can come back to that if anybody has any questions. I'll finish out the overall financial impact of major energy and treatment plant projects. Total projected cost of construction from bond issues, $36.4 million. Total avoided future capital costs if we kept doing what we are doing now and replaced aging equipment, $10.5 million. Net of operating decreases and revenue increases, $51.1 million. Net benefit of projects over 25 years, $25.2 million. UAJA quarterly rates have not increased since 2014. UAJA staff does not anticipate needing to raise rates to support any of the capital projects. Based on the current rate of inflation, it is possible that UAJA will need to rate increase in 2023 or because of item 6 above. I would be happy to go back to item 6 if anybody's interested.
Thank you so much, Wes. And thank you to Mr. Miller too for helping provide that report. Does the board have any questions?
Laura, this is Lisa, I just had 2 quick questions. Thanks so much, Wes. Any idea of the timeline on the complaint that was filed moving forward? You might not know at this point.
I'm sorry, Lisa, I can't hear what you're saying. There's too much reverberation.
Wes, maybe I can you hear me?
I can hear
okay.
you fine.
Okay, great. Lisa had asked about the timeline for the potential resolution of the rate issue, the borough and the UAJ.
Well, I don't think the board, in fact, really favored going to court. And since you see, I mean, this was a 20-year contract with the borough and it ended. It began and it ended. But the borough is saying that they want to keep it the same way, but they haven't really figured out how to do that. And they haven't really gone through the proper protocols. So we weren't really left with much alternative other than to turn this over to the legal arena. So your guess is as good as mine. If you go to court, what about the Honda dealership and the Ferguson Township? Has that been resolved? That went to court.
I'm gonna refrain from discussing that matter as it
Okay,
seems.
but you get my
I'm not even
point.
sure of the matter, but if it were a matter, it would be a legal matter, it sounds like. So we
Right,
can,
exactly. So,
yeah.
but my point was that I was trying to make is that it probably isn't resolved, and it probably won't be for some time. And I think, unfortunately, that's what's going to happen to UAJA. It's going to get stuck in court, and that's going to force an automatic rate increase.
Thanks, Wes. And then just one other, can you hear me okay?
Lisa's asking.
I can, if you want me
Okay.
to translate, Lisa.
Sure.
I do.
Okay, thanks, Wes. Thanks, Laura. At another meeting I attended, there were some residents from Blueberry Crossing neighborhood and Pantops neighborhoods, not in Ferguson Township, but they had commented on the Meeks Lane special study and had just been requesting that residents and property owners be notified when anything moves forward on that Meeks Lane special study, the pump station development. So I just wanted to make a note of that to make sure that that comment was carried back to UAJA. Just the request from property owners
Yep.
to be notified of any proposals or developments in their areas. Thanks, that's all I had.
So Wes, that, just to recap that, it was request from residents and us then passing on to elevate that at the Meeks, in regard to the Meeks Lane project. If they could please be notified in advance of that project moving forward, where it may cause some sort of level of disruption, I would assume from that request.
I think the Meeks Lane project has had a huge public attendance, and I'm not sure if it's the same one, but I mean, there's been big crowds of people that have come in for some pump station. But I will pass that on.
Thank you.
And let you guys know.
Thank you so much, Wes.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Accidentally muted myself. Sorry about that. Okay. Next up, we are on to our special reports and acknowledgements. This evening, under our diversity, equity, and inclusionary acknowledgements, we're noting that it is National Native American, American Indian, and Alaskan Native Heritage Month. We also celebrated Veterans Day, Friday the 11th, and Thanksgiving is upcoming. We have no other reports under that section, so we can move on to our COG and regional committee reports. We have a lot of these tonight, so let's try to be brief, even though there's a lot to discuss. So good luck with that, everyone. Just kidding. Lucy, you're up. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. This is quick. There was a good overview in the attached agenda. The only thing I'll note is the Red Cap report update, and within the agenda is a presentation we received on that, so that will give some good information. This is the Regional Development Capacity Report. It identifies previous capacity and compares it to what's been developed so far, any impact of rezonings, impact of redevelopment. So it's a really good tool, and if you have any questions after looking through that information, you can always email me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions for Lisa? Okay, next up would be my meeting of the Joint Parks Capital and Park Authority. So one of the main topics was the boardwalk project at Millbrook. Another was the Whitehall Road Regional Park. And one topic we touched on, but we really had a long meeting, so really didn't get into it, was the Spring Creek Education Building, Phase 2. Post-meeting, I did email Director Norenberg to get an update on the Spring Creek Education Building. In particular, I had noted in the CIP of COG that there may be a grant match request for the municipalities, and so I was just really following up on that. And then also I noted that the project was under construction, and given recent concerns about underestimation of contingencies for projects and the concern over what that produces for us, I did reach out to Director Norenberg to ask him what that contingency was. He did not provide that in a percentage, but in an actual number. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around it. I am not too familiar with the project. So the available contingency is $210,000. I don't want to put Mr. Norenberg on the spot because it's not really time for him to even be here. But if he knows what the percentage is, I think that we'll be interested in the future. Probably be interested in the future of knowing those numbers in percent and then actual numbers. And then, as I mentioned, the boardwalk we discussed. And in terms of the boardwalk, I think that one of the main thoughts that came out of there was a realization of the elected officials that even though we're calling it boardwalk replacement, once you saw the map in the feasibility study too, it was pretty easy to see that it wasn't just replacement of the boardwalk, but also a significant amount of expansion, which then does explain the $6 or $11 million cost. That's makes more sense that, you know, it wasn't just the replacement. So what came out of that was, I believe the Patton Township rep did support my thought that maybe we could think about scoping or phasing that as opposed to maybe next year borrowing $11 million. So I think that maybe staff may think about that from like a phased approach, but we will wait and see on that. And then the last was was Whitehall Road Regional Park, and that also was the topic of another meeting. So I'll just leave. Well, I guess I shouldn't. Out of that, actually, I will leave it for another report. So we'll move on to, unless anybody has any questions about that, about the Millbrook projects. Okay. Next up is Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, and that would be Jeremy, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Want to first acknowledge today is America Recycles Day. The Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, we met yesterday. I haven't yet completed my written report, but a few items that we talked about was the recycling and refuse rates. There will be an increase in the tipping fees and fuel cost for 2023. We also did discuss the MOU between COG and the Center County Recycling and Refuse Authority. They made some changes in how they proceed. Instead of doing a formal reopening of the MOU every year and meeting multiple times, the Recycling and Refuse Authority will provide essentially to COG their price increase, and then it'll go through all the committees then to review and validate. So instead of those extra meetings on the front end, it'll just go straight to committees and be voted on from there. And during the meeting, they gave an update on the refuse and recycling start time pilot analysis. They are looking forward to a more permanent early start time for the summer months. There was some talk about heat-related concerns and illnesses that they're trying to, that 1 hour earlier start time is definitely beneficial to allowing those, keeping those workers as comfortable and safe as possible, so that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Does anyone have any questions?
I have one question. It looks like the recycling rates are going up quite a bit next year. Is there some, can you tell us the reasons behind that?
They did mention about that. I don't have that with me right now. So I don't know why I didn't write that down, but I will look into that. But yeah, it was mentioned that those did go up there significantly.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, next up we have the Joint Facilities, Parks, Capital, and Synergen Park and Rec Authority meeting, which occurred this morning. Patty and I both attended, and Patty, I'd like to defer to you if you'd like to give any portion of that report.
Oh, boy. I'm still digesting that meeting because a lot of comments and questions came up in that meeting. We were given an update on the Whitehall Road Regional Park, and then there was some discussion about right now the request for more funding from the loan refinancing and that sort of thing, and how did we get there, and process failures and corrections to that to ensure that that doesn't happen again. Much like Jeremy, I probably need some time to put my thoughts together to get it in a written report, but ultimately the discussion was either to forward releasing some of the monies from the refinancing balance that we have, or doing nothing and no additional funds. And no additional funds was not recommended by the staff because that would mean shuttering sort of the park, if you will, etc. But so the motion that was listed in the agenda that you'll see moved forward, except for the fact that in that motion it had said that any unused funds would be put towards Oak Hall projects at Oak Hall Regional Park or Hess, but that can't happen because, as we learned, you cannot use funds unless there's an invoice. So any of the funds that were requested will stay right there to pay the outstanding bills we have at Whitehall Road Regional Park. Laura, anything you need to add to jump in? And I apologize, as I said, I'm still digesting everything and processing in my own head everything that was going on at that meeting today.
I think you did a great job. I'll just add a few details that kind of stuck out for me. Went ahead, discussed with Director Norenberg and also Chair Frank my concerns about the Oak Hall and Hess Field being contained in here because we had not previously discussed that matter. Director Norenberg had mentioned that he had been concerned about elected officials potentially being concerned about what would occur with the unused funds. But as you mentioned today in the meeting, it was determined that those things would be not eligible without, the invoicing and whatnot. So we did remove that from the motion, but it turns out that nobody was actually concerned what we would do with the unused funds. So we did put forward a motion that $578,974 in funds would be released from the restricted loan funds. That is what I would say far more, much more than what appeared to be our deficit right now. So after what has occurred up to this point, I have great concern about us just releasing that money. I hope that we can explore that a little bit as a board, but we have no time. I think maybe it's coming to the COG General Forum. I'm not actually sure what's happening next with that. But if it's coming to the General Forum, that's like in a week or two. So maybe Eric Norberg can let us know more about that process. Maybe it was a very overwhelming meeting, so I may not just have caught that. So just also right now, the project as we move into winter is reaching a slowdown point, and although there's a thought that it may resume sometime in the winter, if it's a mild winter, it may not. And it does appear that we have over $1 million left in funds in the first part of the loan that are unused. So I do wonder, why that number, why releasing, that number now, as opposed to later. And here's my concern with that. I think that if we release it now, that we could have a situation, I don't know this, but in that meeting, it was revealed that the field lighting had been purchased with the loan, and the installation of that, including the rock removal and the electrical, had been purchased with the loan. That was something we were promised, because it was not supposed to be included in this part of the project. We were promised that 100% of that would be fundraised. But now it appears that some of the individuals or groups that fundraising was going to occur from are not able to do that, as many of us are experiencing difficulty during the pandemic. They are as well. So I do believe that had we not purchased that out of the loan, we probably maybe wouldn't be here right now. I think the amount fundraised is like approximately $500,000, maybe a little bit over. And I think, I'm not sure what the total install would be. It was over $600,000, and then there was an additional site work involved. And again, I don't know if they even know what the electrical. So my concern is that if we're releasing all this money, there's no sequencing. There's no sequencing attached to it. So how is the project, and this was a theme in that meeting, how exactly is the project going to move forward? And multiple people mentioned, and now this is a red flag for me, because before, when everybody was saying, oh, we know we're going, not everybody, some people were saying, oh, we know we're going to use that $800,000. I was like, we don't know that. This budget is solid, right? Now people are saying like, oh, as long as we don't have to come back for more. So that's, now for me, that's a bit of a red flag, and I'm going to pay attention to that. So I'm not comfortable moving forward with this, but we can, I guess we're going to find out in general forum what our other board members think about it. I'm not sure. But if it comes to general forum this month, we won't have a chance to talk about that as a board at all before that meeting. So I'm not sure why it couldn't be deferred till December, or maybe that's a plan. So sorry, that was long. It's like millions of dollars in a big project that has experienced significant mismanagement. So it's really kind of an important thing to focus on. So any questions about that?
Just one, Laura. This is Lisa. So maybe I'm wrong. So I thought this was going to go next to finance, to then go to executive. Okay.
2 days from now.
Okay. So, and then, well, I guess it's a two-part. So my concern with the motion really was how vague it was. And so there's no built-in accountability. And since we've had all these problems leading up to this point of needing the additional funds, I would have assumed that clarity in dispensing the funds would be a priority. So I was really, that was my concern with the motion that was recommended to the Finance Committee. So I guess I would I would just forward that to you to share at the finance. That would be my opinion, and we can get a feeling from our other board mates. Is that within the motion, if there was something to clarify, maybe percentages that can be attributed to change orders or overruns that are going in, because now we've been shown, and what they had presented in the meeting today was very clear documentation of the budgeting and change orders, and it was so helpful to see everything. And so I think if you can tie those released funds back to change orders, overruns, and in the motion it just says that it's to finish the initial phase of Whitehall Road. And I'm not even exactly clear on what we're talking about there, because this is a scaled down version of phase 1. So I think just adding more clarity as General Forum, is asked to approve these funds, knowing that the authority has the authority to pay the bills and make decisions on how the funds are used. But I think that would help me be more comfortable in knowing that bills will be paid and the scope will be adhered to that was agreed upon last year.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a good point. You're triggering my memory. I'll just respond to that and then give opportunity for any additional questions. That is a very good point about the ambiguity or the vagueness of the motion. And you rereading it did bring a memory to mind of the meeting and a concern. And that is that we all kind of collectively really understood that the indoor pavilion showing on the master plan for phase 1 was extremely significant. I reached out to Ferguson staff to understand how significant, because the way the motion is made, that facility that we have not authorized could be included in that. The way it's worded, and now that Ferguson has been put in this position unwillingly, I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to the wording of things. So I think that that is very insightful, and it is a very good suggestion. One thing I did ask for in the meeting that was not granted to us, but has been granted to Harris Township, is an opportunity to come back with an, suggested amendments or changes. That was not entertained by the rest of the group at that time. So the other, I think it was that pavilion. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on the other thing that you had brought to mind, but I'm sure it we'll have an opportunity to think of this. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure when in finance, but maybe Eric Nuremberg could just jump in for 1 second and let us know when this is planned to come to General Forum, because we won't have an opportunity to talk about it as a board. Thank you so much. Eric, when will this come to General Forum?
Well, that's certainly part of the next steps that finance can determine. The finance committee will consider this on Thursday, as you discussed, and make a recommendation. So there could be a modification to the motion that was approved this morning. As it goes to the executive committee, then at that point, the executive committee will make a decision about when this will go to General Forum. So we're on track to go to the November General Forum meeting if each of those committees agrees. If not, it would certainly be delayed. We typically don't have a General Forum meeting in December.
Thank you, Mr. Nuremberg. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so it's probably going to be moved on if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, and that would mean that the next time this body would get to discuss this, it would be in General Forum. So, okay, if nothing else, we could and probably should move on. Next up is the Joint Public Safety, Land Use, and Community Infrastructure. I'm sorry, I forgot the other thing I wanted to say. I really apologize. I think it's really important to be transparent about this fact because we are partly responsible for this project. But it's really important to note that elected officials rely heavily on their staff to guide them in terms of project management. We are not project managers. We do the best that we can to allocate resources based on staff advice. And it is my understanding that the reason we are being asked at this point in time for the release of these funds is solely because the contingency was set so low in this project. It was set at something like 1.16%, something to this fact. And the park authority chair did discuss in the joint meeting that the way that they had determined that contingency was to take all of the bids, subtract them from the amount that they had available to work with, and then the remainder would be that what was the contingency for that project. That is not a process that is appropriate to determine the contingency for a project. Today in the meeting, as we looked at what we needed to release, it was pointed out to us how valid it was as a percentage or contingency, approximately 10%. In a previous meeting, I had noted that before this question came to us, not this current question, the prior question, there was a contingency in the budget of 5%. So it still wasn't enough, but it was definitely dropped from 2018 lower during COVID. We know that that is not good budgeting. So I wanted to explain that so we could really just, we need to move on, but it's kind of like a trust and verify at this point. It's a trust and verify. So thank you for indulging me and allowing me that forgotten thought. I'm a little fever brain tonight. So, okay, next up is Joint Public Safety, Land Use, and Community Infrastructure Committee. And Patty, I believe this would have been you today, although, wait, maybe Lisa was there too. Oh man, we had a lot of COG time today.
To be honest with you, what it really was, for lack of a better way of describing it, it felt like it was a State of the Union for emergency services here in Center County. And so public works departments were there, police departments were there, fire was represented, ambulance service, and basically everyone just checked in to make sure there was communication was adequate. I think we had utilities there like Comcast and West Penn Power, I don't think was able to make it, but everyone is in good hands. They seem to be communicating. The communication systems will be working, and that's basically what it was. It was sort of a State of the Union about emergency services. So that was it.
Thank you. I remember that meeting from being on public safety. It was great to see all the partners come together and discuss problems and problem solving. Thanks. Next up we have Mr. Jeremy Thompson with the Jeremy, did you attend the Human Resources Committee as alternate?
It was my understanding that meeting was canceled. I think we are meeting later in the month though with the executive committee.
It was canceled.
Right, very good, very good, thank you. Oh yes, cancellation notice, sorry. Public Safety Committee also canceled in lieu of the great meetup that they had. All right, moving on to staff reports. We have no written report from the township manager. Ms. Martin, would you care to highlight anything?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity just to provide a quick verbal report, and that will simply be on the police chief recruitment. So I would like to just kind of provide an overview. So beginning with the engagement of GovHR, the township engaged several community stakeholders through the survey. We had, last time I checked, over 40 responses to the community survey just to hear from the community to better understand the desired characteristics of the next Ferguson Township Police Chief. We also engaged internal staff members within the police department and outside of the police department just to get a better sense of what the desired characteristics were. And then we did the profile update. We advertised the position between 4 to 6 weeks. We had 25 total responses to the national recruitment. We, GovHR did a screening interview of a total of 14 candidates. That was narrowed down to, I believe, 5 candidates that were interviewed by a team comprised of internal Ferguson Township staff members, as well as we had the participation of Chief Jolly, as well as State College Borough Manager Tom Fontaine. We then brought back our finalists, our final candidates, to participate in what we refer to as a assessment center. The assessment center took place yesterday here at Ferguson Township Building with 3 retired chiefs, police chiefs, conducting the assessment. That information will soon be provided in a written form, and I was able to debrief for several hours with the assessors yesterday. And then we will have a final round of interviews that will take place on Monday, November 21st. I anticipate that an offer will be extended to a candidate no later than the end of the month, at which point the board will be presented with a recommendation for an appointment for our next police chief. And with that, that concludes my verbal update report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Martin. Any questions for our manager? Okay, any questions for any staff that's present with us this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to unfinished business. All right. First up, we have continued discussion of Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk project. This really is just a brief update. I just wanted to establish a moment in the agenda so we could just have a moment to focus on it instead of kind of cramming all the COG things into our reports. And Ms. Martin, all I need to just discuss this would be in the phase 2 feasibility report, could you share screen the map? And I'll give you a minute. And while you're looking for that, I will announce that we did have an executive session of the board today prior to this meeting on a matter of real estate.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can you identify the document that you desire on the screen?
Yes, and actually, Mr. Nuremberg can also jump in. Yes, in the feasibility report number 2, there would be a map showing all of the proposed expansions. I'm getting the page number for you. It's page 5 of feasibility study 2, and that I will get you the agenda. It's .4D.1. Millbrook Marsh Phase 2 feasibility report, underlined final draft. And I also have it up. If you prefer to just give me the ability to share screen, that is also fine. Although I'm not sure, it might take me a minute too. Yeah.
Let me keep trying here.
And I did review this, just brushed on it briefly. I wanted to have the board with me have an opportunity just to look at this map and talk about it. We did see the previous map of where the repair areas were. We know that the facilities committee had already decided they didn't want to just repair the small portions of the boardwalk, but wanted to replace the entire thing. And then as I attended park authority meetings, I realized that the topic was no longer replacing it had gone from repair to full replace to replace and expand. And while we love this asset, we really do, and we want to support this asset, it's the budgets that came with this proposal, there were two different ways that this could be accomplished. One was a mud mat method, and this is like a design, an engineering kind of a thing, right? So you use mud mats to protect the marsh. And then there was the other way, which involved needing to provide more stability for more weight. And so that was the 11 million, and then the mud mats was 6 million. And so in our park joint meeting with the Park Capital Committee and the Park Authority, we discussed this a little bit about how it was still being talked about like a repair, and then it was talked about like a replacement, but we haven't yet said expand. And it's really important to be transparent and to say expand, because there's a significant amount of expansion that's going on here. So I think what came out of that committee, maybe it's because what I wanted to hear, to be fiscally responsible, what I think came out of that committee was at least one other municipality's support of not just kind of plunging headlong into this without thoughts about scoping or phasing. Because so far, when it would come through facilities, the reason I kind of got interested in this is that one of the Harris Township supervisors kept insisting that we had already approved the entire thing to move forward. And so I said, that doesn't sound right to me. One committee cannot do that. And these are significant costs that have not been agreed to. So I just wanted to get some comments on the map. So we could take a look at the map and just review it. Can everybody see it right now up on the share screen? Okay. So it's in words in the document, but I like to look at maps. So you can just look and see that there's a new connector loop and bridge. There's a grass section that will be replaced with boardwalk. There's a grass section to be replaced with TSA, replaced with a grass section to be boardwalk. So I don't need to read it. You'll see how much of it is more expansion. And so as we move forward in this project, knowing that we support it, it would be really important for the region to be able to hear us say we support it, but we are financially unable to make a massive commitment next year. So that's my thought. It's a layperson way of saying it. I know what our budget looks like. I know people around the region or municipalities are raising taxes. I know we just instituted the stormwater fee. I know what our budget talks have been like. I know the Whitehall project is in peril. I know there are talks of many, many other large projects with parks. And I know that we still haven't resolved the lease issue with Penn State. And just to touch on that for transparency, this is a property that is owned by Penn State, great entity. We probably owe a lot to them, but this is the taxpayer money, and the lease currently states that after depreciation of the current, after the Spring Creek Education Building is built, the new lease will kick into effect. And that lease includes a timeline that would allow the new building to depreciate to zero for the term of the lease. But in that lease, it still states that Penn State can walk away at any time from that lease. So I think another issue that we want to solve before we invest money in expanding their asset that they use for classes, and that Clearwater Conservancy uses about 50 acres of that for, I think they have an easement on about 50 acres and they use for their program, which is wonderful. But before we, expand for all of these entities, I think it's important that we really take a look at that lease and consider this investment as being rather perilous without a change to it. So those were my thoughts as I moved through the understanding of this project, and I really want to hear other board members' thoughts. So I'll shut up now, and please, could you share anything with me about your thoughts on the project generally, the map, the feasibility study that you maybe had an opportunity to review before the meeting? Thank you.
This is Patty. I guess I will just echo everything that you said. I agree with your things you had said about the lease, and somewhere along the way, I got lost from when it became repair and replace to expansion. I got lost in that too, and I am the facilities representative. But again, I'm not sure when all these discussions were happening, and I do confess to being lost in the number of projects that Parks had taken on. So that is, I will own that and apologize if I hadn't been reporting clearly on what was happening in facilities. The expansion piece, the only thing I will say, the expansion piece as it was presented was to, I guess, enhance accessibility issues. And when they talk about accessibility issues, I am not sure whether they were talking like in terms of like handicap accessibility or accessibility just for anybody. So that is something that's unclear to me. I agree with you. I have a whole lot of sticker shock right now. So I will just leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. And I just want to cut in and say, your reporting is absolutely fine. I think that there's probably a transparency issue here as well, which we find throughout Parks and COG. And that is probably that there's that working group. And then there's hang on a second there. Then there's I'm going to go through the board first, and then I would love to hear from you then. I think there is the Millbrook Marsh Advisory Committee. And I think that those two groups worked together on this a lot. So I don't know if I think it just came to you when it was all done. So I don't know that you would really have that depth. So don't beat yourself up. So any other comments on the map or the plan?
This is Corey. While I agree that the boardwalk extensions would be really useful and needed in the park, I think regardless of which type of accessibility, it probably needs them for both, right? To make sure that the bulk of the marsh is accessible to all, regardless of disability, but also being a marsh, there are times of year when the trails that are not boardwalks are inaccessible, right? You can't use the whole park. But even as new board member listening to the budget meetings before I came on the board, I'm also very concerned about the cost. And I think it would be at least advisable to come up with a phased plan for taking on this work at the very least.
Thank you so much, Corey. Mr. Thompson or Ms. Strickland?
Jeremy, do you have anything, or else I'll go?
You can go.
Thanks for all the comments. I've agreed with everything I heard, and yeah, I think phasing this project, this seems, yeah, and I know there are other counter arguments to that, but the totality of the cost here is likely going to force that, I think. And I just want to point back to the capital improvement plan that was adopted just weeks ago, where boardwalk expenses for that capital project had been identified at $3.5 million. So $2 million in 2023 and another $1.5 million in 2024. I might be mixing that up a little bit, but about $3.5 million over the next 2 years. And now we're seeing that double, so $7 million at a minimum, up to $11 million if we chose that other plan. So the cost escalation in that budgeting within weeks, I think, is really concerning. And I think you've done fine reporting from facilities too. But I think that there's no way to really wrap your mind around that kind of expansion of a project and a budget within that short amount of time, particularly if this is something that's to be begun next year, has been what the discussion has been, and it's not at all what's reflected in the CIP that's just been adopted. And then just to point out that Ferguson Township pays about a quarter of all the parks budget. So we can't count on grants and donations for these things. If we push forward a plan, I think we have to be prepared to absorb the costs. So I think that's worth noting, that we would likely take on a quarter of that. So that's all I'll say for now. I think there'll be much more discussion in the future on it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this dialogue. When there's such a big project coming through, I think it's a good practice for us to try to take a few minutes in our board meetings to look at them as an individual board. So I really appreciate that. If there's nothing else, we can move on. Okay. Thank you so much, Centrise, for screen sharing. And we can move on to the review of the Center Region Council of Government structure and park governance. I put this on the agenda before I was sick, and now it's on the agenda, and I'm not feeling great. So I apologize for that. I considered just asking you all to take it off the agenda, but I'm going to try to power through here for a few minutes. And the reason I wanted to do this is for transparency and understanding. I had found when I became an elected official, I don't know, seven years ago, that one of the very difficult things for me to understand was the COG. And even though they had some level of introduction to the structure, it was so complicated, it almost seemed endless. So I just thought that since we have two new, one and a half, I'm not sure, Jeremy, what to label you as, but two relatively new, I don't know, take an average, supervisors, and a lot is coming, big asks, big budget stuff. I just thought it would be really good if we could just do a touch base on this. So I did email some links to our manager earlier today. I'm going to ask her to share them, and I'm going to use them as just a visual guide as I kind of touch on a few things in a somewhat disorganized manner. So if Centrise, if you could share the first link, which is the COG organizational chart, which is easily found on the website. You can, certainly do your own homework on this, but when there's a group of us here, kind of using all our brain power together, it's a good place to ask questions or just explore together. So just give Centrise a minute. No problem. Take your time.
Great job being James and Centrise.
Thank you. Yes, James and Centrise right here representing. Okay. All right. Can you see
Thank you.
The chart?
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is the COG organizational chart, and I guess one thing I'll point out that is like a very it's odd how much it matters, but I think the title actually gives a misconception. And I was even called to the carpet by the Park Authority chair in the meeting the other day that I had mistakenly included the Park Authority in COG. And if you'll note in the COG organizational chart, if you go far right, the green Park and Recreation Authority is there. So I think that for transparency, it would be helpful for new electeds and for residents if they could maybe expand the name of this to say COG and its affiliated bodies, or to remove it, because it causes a lot of confusion, especially when you're first elected and you really don't even understand the authority, that an authority is an entirely different entity than a COG or a municipality. So I'll just point that out, that the Park and Recreation Authority is actually not part of COG. Down there underneath it, Center Region Park and Recreation is part of COG, and that is the COG Parks Agency that implements the Parks program. They are guided by the Park and Recreation Authority, which is not a part of COG. that head of that agency reports to the executive director of the COG, although he is guided, or he or she is guided in policy decisions, budgeting decisions to make contingencies at a certain level and whatnot by the authority. The conclusion one should maybe draw here is that it's very difficult as a staff person, I'm just guessing, to be in a position between two governing bodies. So one of my big concerns in the Parks Governance Committee has been the ethical position that we're putting staff in by continuing this structure. So, but that is like a detail of the parks, and I want to get on more of an overview. So, in regard to the COG, we have different municipal members in each program. So you can see here the Center Region Emergency, down at the bottom, the second to the bottom row, Center Region Emergency Management, Regional Fire Protection, Center Region Code, Planning Agency, SCLO, Park and Recreation. So those are the agencies of COG, and they are directed in their operations by our governing documents called Articles of Agreement. Those Articles of Agreement can all be found on the COG website, and they're very helpful to understand how the COG operates for the most part. Things that you'll find in those Articles of Agreement are how we provide assets and how we fund that provision of assets, and then the partners involved with it. So for example, in the fire protection Articles of Agreement, you will probably find information about how we ask the municipalities to provide the capital infrastructure in the form of buildings, but the operations are run by COG. That, I would say right now, I don't want to get off topic on deep policy things, but those kinds of things that are in Article of Agreement eventually, because of growth primarily, become maybe obsolete or need to be changed. And I'm not saying they definitely do, but for example, in the COG fire Articles of Agreement, I believe it does say that, the municipalities would be responsible for the fire stations, but now we've reached a point where we're investing municipal dollars into other fire stations for capital costs. It's not really just about the operations or even the fire trucks that can be moved around, but actual renovations of those stations. Also, they probably depreciated to zero if you're looking at just a tax depreciation. So there's a lot of maybe thought, concern, idea of, how do we move them into the COG structure or not, and what would that look like? So these are the kinds of policy questions that come from our governance structure. So just a few more things. So Centrise, thank you for this. Can you pop up the different municipal members in different COG programs? And that, I think, would be the second link I provided you with.
Yes, I can. I just need a few minutes.
And you can, if you have questions, just say my name because I can't see everybody, and I don't know that I need to keep stopping, but if you think of a question, please ask. Should be the second link. Great, thank you. Okay, so if you take a look at this table, you can see that even though we talk about the COG as one organization, it's really a lot of different organizations because each of the agencies or each of the programs, code administration, emergency management, same things, right? They have different member participants. And those different member participants are significantly different sizes. And so for example, Half Moon doesn't participate in fire or parks. Ferguson and College participate in everything. So does Patton. So Harris Township, for example, doesn't participate in fire protection, but 4 of the other entities do. So as we consider increased cost in fire protection, that's not something that Harris needs to consider. So if they're considering incurring more debt they may have more space in their budget for park debt incurrence, whereas we want to leave space in our budget for fire station debt incurrence, perhaps, depending on how that, evolves. But I think it's really important that as you, participate in the COG, you'll really see the differences in participation come out as you interact with your other municipal members. So it's just something to keep in mind about different priorities that each of us may have as we participate in the COG as a singular entity. Next thing I just wanted to hit on, and so Trace, you don't have to screen share this anymore unless anybody has any questions about it. And then just a couple things that I've noticed as I, learned more about the COG, and then I'll just briefly hit on parks governance and why we made that committee, and just some learning that's come out of it. One thing I've noticed about COG in the larger COG form, not just the strict COG, is we have inconsistent representation strategies across the COG. So, for example, well, right now we have 3 that I can count for sure. We have the library, and that is comprised of 2 reps from the borough, Ferguson, Patton, and Patton, and 1 rep from Harris, Half Moon, and College Township. The reason they apportioned their representation in that manner is it's a reflection of more of a House of Representatives type of a representation, where they acknowledge the population that those representatives are representing. Whereas in the COG structure with the committees and whatnot, we have 1 vote per municipality. So that can result in, for example, a vote. So for example, a 4-2 vote of College Township, Half Moon, Harris Township, and Patton Township, based on the last numbers I have for population, would be representing 34,478 people. And if that were a 4-2 vote and State College Borough and Ferguson Township were on the other side of that, we would lose that vote because we would be a minority 4-2, but we would actually be representing 36,350 people. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and about representation and how votes emerge in the COG, and maybe some explanatory power for those votes sometimes. I did do a little research and to learn about why the House represents population while the Senate doesn't. And I did find just a blurb. It says the House represents population while the Senate represents a landed large property populace. So I thought that was an interesting item. So then there's also inconsistent funding formulas across COG. Some include participation rates and others do not. For example, the pools do not include participation rates. Park programs do not, Park, the agency does not include participation numbers in their programs. Aquatics does not include participation number in their funding. SCLO Library does include participation numbers in their funding. So that basically SCLO both acknowledges the effective participation or population on representation and on funding, whereas the COG doesn't acknowledge the effective population on representation. However, it does acknowledge the effective population on funding. And what I mean by that, I think I said a little backwards. What I mean is that our funding formula for COG includes population, but our voting representation does not acknowledge population. Just something to think about. And then let's see. There's also an internal inconsistency between how we do count students for service provision, but omit them from our funding calculation. I'm curious to know, now that we've grown to this point and Penn State has successfully implemented their reduction of on-campus housing as a percentage of their total student population, I'm wondering why at this point are we admitting students? We provide services for them, and I'll give an example of that. The high rises downtown come at a cost. Well, we know they come at a cost, but a cost we may not understand. They require specialized fire equipment and specialized fire training to be able to be prepared to fight fires in high rise. So it's a policy issue that hasn't been discussed for many years. And I think that maybe at this point in our growth, it may be a reasonable time to examine that process a little bit. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I consistently hear from both parks and of course fire and emergency management, of course. They're very busy with, games and whatnot. I hear regularly of all the students we provide fever brain, all the services we provide to students, but we have yet to acknowledge that in our formula. Okay, now I will transition just briefly to parks governance. So
Can I ask a question?
I think what I want to,
that?
yes, of course, please, yes.
Because I picked up on that during the budget meeting, and so when we're talking about the students being excluded, are those students?
Explain.
Well, how are those the excluded students ones living on campus, or just students living within the borough, period?
I will defer to the manager if she has that knowledge. My understanding is it's not the on-campus students, that it's the census data of but the borough, that's a really good point, because that campus is part of a municipality. Oh my, Ms. Martin, do you have any deep knowledge of that? That is a great question.
Madam Chair, deep knowledge is it's a little bit of a stretch, but I can say that the COG formula is really defined, and Joe Vigilone, I think at some point I can certainly get the document that can present in a written form very well, and then I'm sure we can arrange for Joe Vigilone to provide some greater detail. But in short, when it says that the population is not based on students, there's an actual, I think it's the community survey. There's a publication that is released, and they, through some process, present numbers that extract the students. So it's not based on just State College Borough. It's based on a publication that utilizes a pretty established, I'll say, process to identify what those numbers look like and how. So I can provide you with some follow-up information after the meeting.
That's great, because my follow-up is, we have students that live in our township, and they're not being subtracted from our numbers. Is that correct?
Well,
that's
right.
Another great question.
And so, correct, we don't monitor to decipher of our 19,000+ residents, which are students and which are not. The COG formula for the municipal contribution for the participating municipalities is quite complex, but is also very well defined. So Joe Vigilone has his hand raised, and you would much
I saw that.
You would much rather benefit from him than me.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Joe, please, if you can address those questions.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sometimes it comes out a little wonky. What it is it's a census estimated for population less the ACS data for students, and they're deducted from all municipalities equally. And the COG formula, the last time it was updated was 2008, and it was done through the Action and General Forum, and it was based upon a recommendation from the municipal managers at that time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Thank you, Joe. And then now I will take just a moment to focus on the parks. I think that the parks are particularly complex because of the ownership model that we've evolved to. And what I mean by that is that we have regional facilities that we invest in regionally and operate regionally. And then each municipality has municipally owned facilities, our own parks, that we invest in as municipalities capitally and are operated by the region. So just a really brief overview, the list of the regional facilities, I hope I don't forget any, Oak Hall, Whitehall Road Regional Park, and Hess Field. Those are what's called the 3 regional parks. And then there's Park Forest Pool and Welsh Pool. And then there's Millbrook Marsh and the Active Adult Center. I don't want to continue taking a lot of time, but I will say that, let me see. The 3 regional parks, kind of think of them as one way to manage something. Then the 2 pools, another way. And then Millbrook, different. And then Active Adult Center, different. And when I say manage, I mean everything. I think everything is different about each of them. Ownership, funding, the way the funding is figured out, like Active Adult Center is partially the county, partially the municipalities, and then there's participation. It's leased and it's at the mall. Millbrook is owned by Penn State. We lease it. We provide for it regionally. In the past, we never did capital investments in it, and that's why the lease was like it was. We only did maintenance, but now we're moving into a time where we need to do capital investments. The pools and the 3 regional parks would be the most similarly managed, but the 3 regional parks have their own articles of agreement, which is interesting to me because, as I understand the actual COG articles of agreement, that that each individual program or agency, I think is the word that they use, has an articles of agreement. And so if one interpreted that as meaning that anything that has an article of agreement is a program, one would interpret the 3 regional parks as being a separate program from parks, but that's not really how it's discussed. So I hope we can follow up and understand that. It's a little interesting thing for me that I just kind of learned I didn't really understand. And then, of course, the municipal parks, we have 12 in Ferguson, and I believe there's something like 48 across the region. I'm going to take a minute to just talk about the biggest transparency issue that I can see with parks is that our parks are functioning on 2 sets of outdated and defunct articles. And what I mean by that is that they don't resemble in any way our current operating, not via representation. They have things in them like the parks articles of agreement says things like the State College Borough is going to hold all of our assets in trust and that we will all individually own all of our maintenance equipment for the parks. That's not at all how it works. So when I realized that, and the previous executive director of COG used to call me a student of local government because I nerd out on the stuff. My father was in governance. My uncle was in governance. I like it. I'm interested in it. So when I first learned that this was so not how we were functioning, I knew immediately that was a real red flag for transparency. And I asked, could we update it? And I think that may have been a several-year precursor to eventually landing at the Parks Governance Committee. And so now that governance committee has decided not to meet for the rest of the year. And I believe it made it back into the budget that we are going to have a facilitator. But in the meantime, I think that ethical position that we're putting staff in by having such an odd structure, and then it's backed up by multiple legal documents that are not helpful to functioning within the structure. It's just a big concern of mine. And what I hear from the rest of the general forum is that, yeah, it's a concern, but we have to do all these projects first. And that's not my perception. It hasn't been, and it will continue to not be, because I feel like that this structure is what is putting us into very difficult conflict situations. And I can tell you right now that there is no way that any COG elected official would have taken a budget, subtracted the bids, and gone with that as a contingency when we know we're on the hook for that funding. So I think that that structure, not a person, a structure enabled that fail. So I don't think it's secondary. I think it's primary. That's my advocacy, but I really wanted to educate and just to get people thinking about these things. So any other questions? And we can call it a night on this if not. Okay, I'm seeing none. Lisa, can you scan the room and see if anybody, okay.
No, nothing. Thanks for the overview. That was really helpful.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's see what's up next. We've got conclude the review and discussion of Center Region Council of Governments 2023 budget. It's not a good night for me to have a sore throat. Okay, so at our last meeting where we reviewed the COG budget, we decided as a group to defer the parks portion of that budget review to this evening. Thank you, Eric and Joe, for coming back to our meeting to support us through this. So I would like to, I don't know, we have to, so let's kind of lay out our path here. We have to produce comments for all of the COG budget. We did make some of those comments last time. Do we have, are we able to refresh our minds of those general comments? If not, that's okay. I'll move just into any other general comments that have come up since then, and then we can move into the parks budgets. So first I'll take a pause and ask the manager do we have that list easily available? If not, that is a-okay. We'll just plunge in.
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe we can pull it up. I think that.
Thank you so much. If not, as I said, not a problem. While you look for that, I'm just going to navigate to our first section then. And as I navigate, I was considering going through the detailed budget, but it's very detailed. So I wanted to get a read on the supervisors, if the summary budget is sufficient, or do we want to start with the summary and see if we need to consult the detailed if we need to?
I think start with the
Any
summary.
thoughts?
That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
Summary, okay. All righty. So we'll start with a review of our previous comments, if possible. If not, we'll move into our parks budgets.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I believe we had it in the agenda packet, but I will continue to look for this if the board would like to continue or.
It is.
Okay, yeah, we'll continue. No problem, sure. Okay, I am just navigating us to Park and Recreation operating budget, which is on page, my PDF is showing 38 of the summary budget. That's the Park and Recreation operating budget. Also, I will, since we did just do the organizational review, I will point out that this is a C budget, which means it's a COG budget. One might ask the question, why would we need to note it's a COG budget within the COG budget? It's because of the confusing organizational structure that includes the park authority under parks. So in the parks budget, you'll see C budgets and R budgets. C budgets are considered COG budgets and R budgets are considered park authority budgets. Still a little bit struggling to understand why they're that way, but I hope that understanding will eventually come to me. Okay, so if everybody's on page 38.
Can I just ask a quick question about that?
Oh yeah.
Do we allocate our funds separately to those two budgets, or do they all go to one pool and then get distributed between the two entities?
That sounds like a Joe question. Thank you. Mr. Vigilone, are you able to answer that, and do you need it to be repeated?
I am able to answer, do not need to be repeated. So each individual budget is contributed to by Ferguson Township. So if you would do that based upon the funding formulas earlier stated, the parks operating budget will go in according to a threefold calculation, including assessed value of real estate, earned income wages, and population net of students. The Active Adult Center, which you also contribute to, which is a rec authority budget, and the budgets are given letters to denote that they are separate employers or separate EIN, separate audits from me. That one would be funded via usage at the Active Adult Center. But each one of these budgets is contributed to individually by the municipalities. And if you look at the detailed budget, it does outlay that for each municipality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Any other questions right now? Thank you. Okay, so we're on page 38. Any comments, questions about expenditures and revenue, concessions,
Yeah,
summer camp revenue?
Yeah, this is Corey. It looks like the concessions budget, they're predicting it will go up over 300% in the coming year. Do we know what the expectation is there? That seems like a large increase year over year.
Is that truck, Mr. Nuremberg? Just a guess. Or maybe Joe. I'm sorry.
I had trouble hearing the question. Could you repeat that?
Oh,
please?
sure. Go ahead, Corey.
My question was about concession revenue in the 2023 budget. It looks like it's going to go up 361%. My question is, where is that extra revenue going to come from concessions?
Right, that is the planned concession vehicle that would be serving multiple facilities, including pools and the regional parks and other park locations.
So Corey, the general forum chose to purchase a concessions truck, like a mobile food truck, but offering more like concession stand food than more of your typical food truck food. So that's what Director Nuremberg was mentioning. So the assumption is that after the purchase of that truck, that revenues will go up. Are we still purchasing that truck right now without the agency director in place? Is that still moving forward right now, or?
We just met last week with the parks manager to go over all of the capital equipment purchases that are planned, and the chassis for the concession vehicle needs to be a certain class. I think he said an F550, and we're waiting for that to the purchasing opportunity from Ford to be open for that class of vehicle. And so the F-150s that closed recently, the other heavier vehicles will be open soon, and so we're watching for the opportunity to purchase the chassis on CoStar. So yes, we're still proceeding because of the scarce availability of those type of vehicles and the long lead time currently for ordering vehicles, but the specifications are in preparation for the concession body.
Thank you. I do have one comment on this page. I was wondering if I could get board support for, we have mentioned this in other budgets, the COG budget, and there has been progress made on it. But I wonder if we could make the comment, could we please see summer camp revenue broken down by municipality? And I just would be very interested in understanding participation for parks. And the reason why is that level of service analysis is a typical analysis that's done for parks. And the assumption that underlies that is it's within a certain area that a park will draw individuals. So I don't know how that holds true with summer camps, but at this point in time, because of that separation, we don't have access to any of that data, which we would normally have as elected officials. So I just would request that we just kind of put a general comment that anywhere that's remaining that we don't yet have the data for revenue for parks, broken out by municipality, if we can make an effort to do that. And then that would include all of them, including the aquatics budget, which includes pool passes. And one more bit of support for that idea is that I think from the statistics that we did get, it does appear that there's a pattern. It's just there's not enough data yet to be able to see it. And based on that level of service analysis assumption, I would think that, you know, pools would draw primarily from those that are like around them. And in the future, this would be a mechanism by which we could understand if we're serving the area uniformly. So that would be why I would want to ask for that comment. And I wonder if I can get board support to ask for continued effort. Many thanks for previous effort, and also continued effort to produce that data in by municipality as well as region. So I can't see anybody's faces, so I'm kind of at a, like, I can't read your thoughts as well. So if you can verbalize them, it would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I'd be supportive of that, and then I'll let the rest of the board speak. And I just wanted to note that I do have one more comment on this page before we move on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm supportive of that as well, Laura.
Thank you.
I also support that.
And yeah, I support that as well. Also, speaking on summer camps, I would be curious also to know just how I'm still forming the thought in my head. I do have some slight concerns of like duplication of summer camps. Like, are we offering a summer camp that everyone wants to go to, or are residents maybe deferring to other sports camps offered by other entities outside of Parks and Recreation? Just,
Thanks, Jeremy.
you know,
I
are
think,
we getting
yeah.
the most out of the time, effort, and expense that we're putting into that program?
Right. Are we filling a need or being duplicative in our efforts?
Are we getting a good return on the
Yeah.
investments that are, yeah.
Fair question. Yeah, that'd be a good
That's
comment.
a great idea. What's that, Patty? Sorry.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh boy, I'm here.
We
We
agreed with the comment. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Lisa, did you have a comment then?
Yeah, I just had one more thing on the concessions truck. I know that in that budget meeting, those expenses were approved or the operating expenses were approved, so that if the truck is bought in 23, that there's funds there to be able to staff it and have all the equipment and everything that's necessary to run it. So given, I guess, a known delay in receiving the truck, and then also the delay in the field availability at Whitehall, I'm wondering if these budget numbers of revenue expenditure are still accurate in what you're estimating.
That's a great question. Can we put that?
Yeah.
Right, mostly in the revenue side. Because I think as soon as the truck comes in, those expenses will go out. You'll start staffing it and filling it and running it out there. But I'm wondering about the predicted revenue on that. So just a comment there, I guess.
I would be very supportive of asking that question as a comment. We can also just give thumbs up if we want to. I can't really see them, but Lisa, I'm going to ask you to look at thumbs.
I see general facial agreement.
Great. Great. Okay, if nothing else on this page, we can move on. And our Park Authority appointee is here. Bill, I kind of want to try to move through this. Do you mind keeping your comments to the end, or did you have something you wanted to add right now?
I just had a question, Laura, with regard to your request for data about the summer camps. My question is, are you talking about the residency of the camper, or are you talking about the location of the camps?
I love that question, and I'm going to say both. Both are very significant in analyzing that data. Thank you. Yes.
Well, it would be my hope then that in the comment that you make through the paperwork of this process, that you specify that, because that way we know where to draw the data from.
Thank you very much. We did encounter an issue with that, that we had asked about sport field rentals, and the first time the data did come, like who they were rented by, and then the next time the data came, where they were rented. And then I did contact COG staff and I said, we'd probably be interested in both in the next report if you can. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Bill. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. We've got capital equipment budget next, page 39. So this is why it's difficult to look at the summary budget, is it's really just about, changes and less about what's purchased exactly. So it makes it a little bit difficult, but much more expedient. I guess my question about this is similar to Lisa's, is what has been changed? I know there was a lot of intended capital equipment purchases in the gearing up for Whitehall Road Regional Park, and now there's going to be that year change. Although I think I'm not sure about timeline, sorry. Was anything taken out of the budget, or do we still think that we're going to be meeting the timeline that it would be appropriate to keep it in this budget?
I think the key thing is that, we are aiming for having equipment necessary for Whitehall Road Regional Park, as well as other equipment that needs to be replaced, received on schedule. However, supply chain issues and delays in manufacturing have thrown things off quite a bit. So the parks manager has identified key equipment that he needs, like heavy duty trucks that can tow, and he's trying to stretch lighter duty trucks that are not towing heavy equipment to be able to serve another year. So he's trying to stretch things as much as possible, but he's also looking at purchasing equipment that may be better able to be more flexible in multiple locations until we can get things back on course with the vendors of some of our heavier and more specialized mowers. So we're really trying to stretch a lot of the equipment that was deferred from replacement in 21, 22, and planned for 23, but some of that may not be received until 24. So we are trying to stay within budget and manage the budget, and Joe can talk a little bit about the leveling that we're doing within this program, or section of the budget. But we really are at the mercy of the suppliers, both in terms of vehicles as well as equipment.
Thank you. I have a comment for this section. It's kind of an overarching general comment. Does anybody else have any comments? I'll take them first. Lisa, I'm going to use you as the camera is on you, Lisa, so I'm using you as my eyes in the room.
No, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, great. My comment is, could we receive a updated fleet management plan for the COG? I think in the CIP, this had been our comment, like what it appeared was that I think in parks in particular, there were no planned replacements for 2023, but then there were like items that were in the budget. And I really am very vaguely remembering, so I may be wrong, but it doesn't matter if I'm wrong, because if you have the updated thing already, you can just send it. And if not, our comment that I would request would be, because that's a driver for the budget, and so we can better understand and be more transparent in how these assets are being replaced. I know there were a lot of backups that were being stored. We have storage issues. So I know this really isn't our business, that it's supposed to only be the authority's business, and we only should talk about how much money we're gonna fund it. But for me, I can't help but wonder about the management and think about it a little bit, because I don't know, I feel like that's what I was elected to do. So could we possibly, whether it's currently updated or it will be updated, could we get an updated version of that? And that would be my question.
So the short answer is yes, but the
Thank
long answer is the meeting that I referenced earlier with the park manager that Joe and I had last week was to basically update that plan to start to filter out the pieces of equipment that are no longer necessary and can be removed from the fleet and sold, putting money back into the program, as well as to be updated given the supply chain issues with the no anticipated. Yeah, I don't think we know exactly when some of those vehicles will arrive. So when it's available and ready to be shared, then we can certainly share that with the finance committee, and you can then share it with the board.
Thank you so much. I would anticipate, since we're trying to get that COG budget earlier this year, that would be like done early in the year, since it'll feed into the budget. I'm guessing, but that's just me guessing. Any other? Yeah. Any other comments? I have one other one. My comment, and maybe it's just a thought I want to put out there. So we are noticing that this is a C budget. It's a COG budget. And then we just talked about Whitehall Road Regional Park, which is an R budget in another place in this budget. But we talked about how the capital equipment is coming out of the C budget. So that's a comment that we put in the CIP. And I know that, I believe Joe said that the history was that the initial capital investment, I might be butchering this, would come out of the R budget. And that was not for like replacements of capital, something to this effect. Or no, it was the C budget was always used for equipment. That's what it was. The C budget was always used for equipment. And I think our comment was maybe to begin to put the R equipment in the R budget, again, for transparency, for easy to understand, for less questions, less time on the budget. So I would really love support on that question/comment of, could we consider putting the capital equipment for the R budget into the R budget instead of the C budget? What do you think?
I think, seeing consensus
Yes,
maybe
yes.
on that
Okay.
comment. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Anything that can add clarity to the delineation between what the authority is allowed to use and is authorized of municipal contributions and loan proceeds, the better, because it gets very muddy looking through this. It's very difficult as someone who's not involved on a daily basis to follow the dollars and understand where everything's allotted and allowed to be used. So anything that provides clarity on that, I would support.
Thank you. Okay, if nothing else, we'll move on to the Park and Recreation Aquatics operating budget on page 40. My only comment is, as before, the participation, which would include pool passes and daily visits. I will note that years and years ago, I think 2 park agency directors ago, it's been a while, I believe that they have told me that they don't ask for municipality of residence or something. I can't quite remember, but there was like a barrier to them getting this data somehow that wasn't about the data system. So if it's that, I wonder if we can have a further policy discussion about that as municipalities that participate in that program, that we really want to make sure that we're receiving the same level of service as others, especially because we're paying the most because we have the most population minus, after you subtract the students. But we, we also have the biggest municipality. So that level of service analysis done in a informal way, even through participation data, would give us a read on, our residents using the pools as much as the borough and, Patton or whatnot. So that's my comment. Sorry, I'm gonna go on and on about it. But my comment, I guess, is just while Joe and Eric are here, we don't have to write it down. Could we continue this dialogue? I think you know how valuable this data is to us, broken down by municipality. And I just wonder if we can make sure that we continue this dialogue. That's all. So, thanks. Any other aquatics comments?
Laura, this is Lisa. I guess just, to monitor the fund balance would be my comment, because pools operating is, I guess, it pays for itself really, but expenditures are outpacing revenues a little bit here. I'm wondering, I did have a question, but I think I've figured that out. Is there anything in the high school and auditorium expenditures other than rental and teacher fees? I would think that'd be it. It doesn't matter. It's so minor.
Oh.
But.
Oh. I'm sorry.
I think there might be a little bit of insurance cost in there as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be my only comment is, to be monitoring that fund balance.
Thank you, Lisa. You brought something to mind. The natatorium. So while we've been talking about parks governance, I have heard from some elected officials that they really want the State College Area School District to have a voting position on any kind of a governance structure as we move forward. And the reason for that is because they provide assets for us. And I made this assumption that they provided them for free. And I must have always missed this in the budget, and I'm embarrassed. But this is rent, right? Yeah. Okay. So what that means is we're asking that entity to have a voting seat. They don't contribute money, but we pay them money. So wouldn't they vote? Anyway, that's interesting to me. So Joe, am I getting this wrong?
I think the one thing is, while it's rental on one aspect, that's what we're calling and utilizing it, they're also manning lifeguards at the pool when we're using it within there. So they do have some operating costs associated with that pool and keeping it open for their own purposes as well.
That's great. I had asked about that in particular in the Parks Governance Committee, and I don't know if it was ever produced. So could we entertain this comment, which would be a building on that? Could we get, and this is a general budget comment, it's about aquatics, but other areas too, because I think SCASD also maybe gives some other assets or rents out to us some other assets. But that list I asked for, could we get the list of all of the assets that the SCASD shares with us? And could you indicate how they're shared? If they're shared for free, if it's like rent or an in-kind, like you just mentioned, that would be really helpful for us as we move forward through parks governance discussion. Okay, any other aquatics? We'll move on. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and move on to Park and Recreation Aquatics capital budget. Any comments for the capital budget? Lisa?
Seeing none.
Okay, are we asking about the change in the fund balance or monitoring that at all on this one?
Just lost my place.
I don't know. I have some trouble with understanding these tables, to be frank. That's why I kind of rely on the details. It looks like, to me, it looks like there's a deficit in the fund balance. Joe, am I reading that right? At the end? Thanks for the hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, ask me as soon as I raise it up there. I think the key point of that is if you look at the municipal contributions of a total of just under $568,000, $415,000 of it is going to debt service. and roughly 130,000 is going to capital improvement. So this fund balance will ebb and flow, but we are going to need to discuss more in terms of capital improvement portion of the budget, a reinvestment strategy that COG is moving towards. That's one of the things the Facilities Committee has been talking about. And Laura, you probably also remember on the backside of the Finance Committee, we did a joint meeting with the Facilities Committee discussing the outcomes of the CIP and a reinvestment strategy. And the number that was floated out there was 2% because that's best practices for industry. We did not implement that this year with the budget tightness and everything. But going back towards it on a $568,000 budget, about 4 out of 80% of it's going to debt service, and the remainder is going to capital improvements.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I wonder if there's any way, is that, oh, there it is. I see it. I'm like, is there a way we can show that? And there it was. Very good. Thank you. All right. Any other thoughts on this page?
Seeing none.
I have a question. Do we plan to buy more like inflatable things for Welsh Pool this year? Is that as part of the budget? Because if it is, my comment would be, could we please not? And I know it's kind of too late to make any changes in the budget. So it's kind of not even maybe worth us talking about it, but maybe somebody thinks about it in the future. But I know other board members have mentioned that we really love the pools, but like there is so much stuff at Welsh that it's almost even crowding out individuals at this point. And we just wonder, you know, it would be helpful for the budget and also maybe for the people that maybe want a little more space and less inflatables if we consider our path forward with that. And maybe that also involves another conversation with the authority because they're in charge of all that, I guess. But I don't know, could we, is that a comment, Lisa? I know, is that a comment just to?
That could be a comment. I think the only thing that had been in there were improvements to the play structure, and those were deleted for this year. So, but I see Joe has his hand raised, so he can probably.
I have the detailed budget up in front of me. We're replacing at Park Forest Pool 2 pool pumps, filter, internal components, the infrastructure as dictated by the IT study. And at Welsh, 2 pool pumps and a storage upgrade and the infrastructure associated with the IT study.
Thank you so much. Those pool pumps, how far are we into that project? I know we had to like replace 2 a year for 3 years or something to that effect. Are we almost through that series of replacements? If we know, it's okay if you don't.
I'm not sure where we are in the multi-year facet of that, but I know we have been having trouble securing and scheduling some of the professional help that we need for helping to install those. So there was some delay with the ones purchased earlier this year, but those sorts of things are coming back in line in terms of availability after pandemic delays. So I think we're getting back on track.
Thanks so much, Eric. Would board members support just a question? I appreciate that information, but just to know once, like how back on track we are, like how many years left we have of that. That's possible. That's possible. Would others support that question? Just asking how many years we have left of that.
Yes.
I couldn't tell from the CIP, or it would be answered. I couldn't understand the writing there.
Yeah, we were interested when we discussed the CIP. We were interested in having that process move forward so that there were fewer shutdowns at the pools in the summer. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing agreement.
Okay, great. And Joe, is your hand back up?
It is. I just can't find my mute button. So it looked like 2023 there were 4, and I'm looking at the CIP for 2024. And there is nothing in 2024 in terms of pumps on the CIP, nor is there anything in 2025. 2026, we have 4 more pumps in the pools in the budget, or the CIP for that time frame, and nothing in 2027.
Thank you. Thank you. We assume that will be the end of it then, I guess. Okay, thank you. Okay, if no other comments, we can move on to the Active Adult Center. Any comments on the Active Adult Center?
Seeing none.
I think I'm noticing a trend here. Is it accurate to say the reason the fund balances are lower on many funds is because of our constraints on the budget? Or am I making wrong connections, Joe? Or maybe, yeah, please. Thanks.
I would say it's less about that. Some of it's about the constraints on the budget, and that would be the 2023. But the 2022, when we developed the 2022 budget, we had done it when inflation was about 5.5%. We know that inflation went up to 8-9%, but not having a fund balance as a buffer, what does it lead to? Lower fund balances, which leads to lower starting fund balances. 23 was really impacted by tighter budgeting in terms of with what happened with the budget being remanded back to staff this year. But we started at 2020, we ended 2022 and started 2023 lower than anticipated just because of inflation only being at 5.5% when we put this together in the late summer of 21 for the 22 budget, and it actually peaking in 8%. We thought 5.5 was high, but we hadn't seen anything yet.
Thank you for that explanation. Makes a heck of a lot of sense. Makes me sad too. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I have one
The
question.
Active Adult Center.
On the Active Adult Center, it looks like our municipal contributions are going up by 60%. Is that to help replenish the fund balance, or it also looks like there's a prediction that the operating expenditures are going to go up as well?
So one of the
Is a question for Joe or Eric? Yeah.
So one of the key increases in the operating expense for the Active Adult Center is increase in costs for custodial services. We had to switch vendors earlier this year, and basically the costs are increasing in several of our COG budgets with the commercial vendor that we're using, an independent contractor. And, we have to maintain certain standards with seniors, a vulnerable population there at the Active Adult Center. And so, but they're not cleaning every day. I think it's 3 days a week. They're cleaning, and staff are doing spot cleaning in between. One of the things we're looking at for potentially a change later this in 23 or for 24 is whether we're at a point where it makes sense to bring a custodial service operation in-house as a staffed function rather than contracting out, now that we're at that point with several facilities with the rising costs. So we're going to be evaluating that early in the year and bring a recommendation back to the appropriate committees.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Moving on from the Active Adult Center, unless there's any other questions. Joe, I'm going to ask for your support on the Millbrook Marsh Center operating budget and capital budget with the detailed budget. Could you just kind of talk to us about the operating costs and the capital costs then that we're seeing here in this budget? Be trying to follow the Millbrook, and with all the changes and whatnot, I lost a little track. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have a sneeze sneaking up on me. It's not here yet, but you'll know when it comes. I can promise you that. So if you look, and the one that I look at in terms of columns is over to the right, you've got a change budget to budget. So you've got a $162,000 increase in municipal contributions. A large portion of that is due to the fund balance. It's about $50,000 of it. And that is a lower than starting fund balance, which we had talked about with some of the increased costs associated that were unexpected. And then we have 100,000 of new budget to budget increases in this year. So that's the 53 in personnel and 47 in operating. The 53 in personnel is mainly due to part-time staff and bringing back some of the programs that they were doing. And then the operating $47,000, if I look down here, there's a large portion of operating supplies which went up, but that was mainly funded through grants. I can remember that. $10,000 increase in janitorial service, and oh no, they took that out there. And then there was some more gifts for parks things going on there. And the other thing is in the detailed budget, they will give you an overview and COG-wide budget trends which are impacting the budget. So for the overview for the Nature Center, the program revenues returned to pre-pandemic level in 2022 with higher participation rate and the return of partnership programs provided by Millbrook Marsh at State College Area School District school programs. The impact of facility reservation revenue is due to phase 2 construction plan for 2022 and 2023. That means the facility reservation revenue is going to be lower than anticipated due to the renovations. And then they were saying about the delay in the project and the higher number of facility reservations being held and not booked because of the construction timeline. And then they expect things to go back more to normal on the rental reservations for the next year.
Thank you so much.
And that's pretty much the operating budget.
Any comments on the operating budget? Thank you so much, Joe. Looking like no. Okay. All right. And let's move on to the capital budget. Joe, could you do the same thing for this? That would be great. Or similar. Thank you.
So capital budget is a gear up and a start of the project for the Welcome Center and the Spring Creek Education Building Phase 2. So that's a lot of the expenditures you have on the capital side. So if you were looking down in terms of the municipal contributions, we have roughly $150,000 in municipal contributions. 90, almost 100,000 of it is related to whether it's interfund loans that have previously been done and repayment schedules associated with that. And the interfund loans relate to the study that you guys talked about for the boardwalk, as well as the repairs to the roof at the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center barn. And then the other one is phase 2 funding associated with the Spring Creek Education Building. The municipalities are split over 2 years from 7/1/21 through 6/30/23. Basically allocate $25,000 a quarter over that time period so that we would get $200,000 for their portion of the Spring Creek Education Building and Welcome Center projects. And then you go to the expenditure side, and that's pretty much what it is. It's a debt service associated with the interfund interagency loans, which we have on the books previously, and then the projects the aforementioned projects.
Thank you so much. Any questions for the comment guide or thoughts?
Seeing none, Joe answered all of my questions on both pages as he explained everything. So
That was
thank
so
you.
helpful. Thank you. Okay. I did have a question. It's a larger budget question because of what you had mentioned, Joe, about the interfund loan, was it interfund or interagency?
Both.
Oh.
Interfund interagency loan, that's what we call it.
Okay. Okay. So that an interagency interfund loan funded the Millbrook Marsh feasibility study level 2. Was it the whole amount, the 200 and some $1,000 that had funded? And yeah.
Correct. In the detailed budget, to give you the actual text to it, in 2019, an interfund loan between Millbrook Marsh Nature Center Capital Fund and Center Region Code was agreed to in the amount of $80,000 to finance repairs of the roof of the barn at the Nature Center over 5 years. The annual repayment based on a 3% interest rate is $17,500. And then in 2022, an interfund loan between Millbrook Marsh Nature Center and Fire Capital was agreed to in the amount of $225,500 to finance a boardwalk feasibility study for 5 years. The annual repayment based on a 2.5% interest rate is $48,540.
Thanks. This brings me to my comment. I have yet to grasp the concept behind the interagency interfund loan because it seems like it costs us money to do it or reapportions money or something. I know we all agreed we're going to have them charge interest, but I also then wonder, so we all approve that, right? In the general forum, we approve these things as they occur. I think I remember doing that each time. So that's actually a question. Yes. Okay. I thought so. Okay. I have struggled understanding what strategy we're using. Like, why are we doing that, I guess? So I think before I had mentioned to Chair Frank in our finance meeting, I had thought it was for emergencies, that we did these loans like, oh no, something broke, an HVAC system broke, and we need the money in the budget, and we don't want to do a budget amendment and have municipal, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my question is there a policy document on okay, there is. But then it's not about emergencies though.
Muted myself and finally caught myself on that one. No, I don't believe it is. But it's really a policy decision on when the elected officials want to utilize it, in my opinion.
I guess I don't ever want to use it. I don't understand when I would want to, but somebody knows when, and it comes before us. So I'm not sure. How can I use that tool?
I think the reason why was they were going to avoid borrowing costs and paying a bank, and we could almost act as our own bank. So if we're looking at not needing the funds for 5 years, so the most recent one for the boardwalk feasibility study was for the fire capital fund. So we were able to utilize fire capital funds and pay the deposit rate that they would have gotten anyways over that period of time based upon when this went into place. That way, we're basically cash flowing ourselves, paying ourselves the interest, but not incurring any borrowing costs or paying the bank the interest. I think that was sort of the thought process associated with it, but we needed a policy in terms of when we would access it to protect each fund.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Thank you. Tip me off. Mr. Frank talked about smoothing. There it was. Smoothing. Sending the cost out over years. And I think my strategy is, let's put it in the budget and not smooth it, because I lose track of all the smoothing. I can't tell where the money's happening out there in the 5 years in the front and what we're paying for. And so, I would approach that by looking at the policy, but there would be multiple ways that we could approach that. That would be, maybe making a document to help us track those projected costs, right? Because doesn't that then take some of our budget? Anyway, right. It encumbers a future amount of budget instead of dealing with it now. And I have trouble keeping track of everything. So I guess my comment would be, or question would be, could we make a document that helps us track that over time? So it's like a CIP, or I don't know what it would call it, for all of the various interagency, interfund loans and how long they're for. I guess I'm seeing us it's good because we don't defer the maintenance or something, but then we have that cost up front that we forget about and then kind of have to go over again. Anyway, so could we just make the question of, could we have some sort of document to help us organize that in our minds?
Yes.
In my mind. Thank you. Okay, great. I'm sorry, I missed it, Patty.
We're in agreement.
We're in agreement.
Thank you. Oh shoot, there it is. I lost my Zoom screen. Okay, we are through. Nope, we've got Center Region Park and Rec, Regional Park Capital Budget. So there's our budget, R15. Sorry, I didn't point out the R's and the C's before. Are there any comments on this portion of the budget? I'm hearing none. I have a comment. Is anybody in the room, Lisa, having a comment there?
No, I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. I have a comment about our articles of agreement for the regional parks. It relates to this budget. And in that agreement is a clause that says all capital improvements or investments, I forget the exact word, for the regional parks will go through the budget process. So I think I need some clarity on how we're having this simultaneous loan process that seems to be disconnected to the budget, whereas in that Articles of Agreement, it says the capital requests, I think it might say, should go through the budget. And I really support that part of the Articles of Agreement because, again, simplify. Everything's in one spot, right there. So I don't know what that means. So what I think that means is we should show the loan, right, somewhere in that budget, but we should also have already finished any loan discussions by the time the budget comes out. So it's not a parallel, disconnected process, but an integrated process into the budget, like the Articles of Agreement seem to say they want. I might be misinterpreting them wrong. I'm sure Mr. Williams, Mr. Terry Williams, can certainly give his opinion on that. But that's how I read it. And for us, I think it would be so much simpler. So my question is, could we review those Articles of Agreement just for our own clarity on that statement? And also, could we consider whether it actually says that or not? Could we consider in the future making sure that any loan discussions are prior to the budget and then they're within the budget so that we have a total understanding of all of the financial commitments? So that is my question comment that I would ask for support on, or questions on.
Yes, I'm seeing support for that comment in the room.
Thank you. I have no other comments. Does anyone else have any other comments?
Just one question, and this is general, not on this, well, maybe it's on this page. The governance committee facilitator, did that get added back in? I think we need to make a comment on whether or not we wanted that added back in, because I think it's deleted for now.
So it is currently not in the budget. The $5,000 is not included, but a couple of the other municipalities have talked about that, and there's at least one suggestion coming from another municipality, so that come Thursday morning, the Finance Committee could consider adding the $5,000 back into the budget based on the comments of other municipalities in Ferguson, if that's the consensus of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree in a way, but I also have additional thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the money put back into the budget. You know, I think it's a really important mission that committee was given. You know, whatever happens with that, I think having at least a budgeted amount to hire somebody to help, especially if that's the only way it's going to move forward, I think I'd want that back in there.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'm seeing agreement in the room.
I would support that comment with some hesitation and lots of concern. We spent a year talking about things, and then really the temperature of the rest of the forum is like, we can just keep moving on. I'm a little bit concerned about it. So I would support the comment, but yeah. I would add, could we please begin our discussions at the place where the Comprehensive Plan Committee left off in 2019? Because it really provides a focusing point for our discussions and is not that as meandering as what do we want our authority to do? Perhaps nothing. So I think that was maybe took us very far off course. I mean, nothing in terms of our projects, certainly fundraising, always fundraising. But anyway, so those are my additional concern and thoughts on that, but I would support that. Any other thoughts on the budget? And now we can do any other outstanding overall comments. Any other outstanding overall comments?
Not seen any.
I'll
Thank
I'll
you.
just add
Sorry.
one. It appears in many of the Parks and Recs budgets, there's going to be an increase in municipal contributions, and I think we just need to be mindful about those in the current fiscal situation that we find ourselves in.
I would support that as a comment. Thank you. Okay, seems like we're winding down here. So I will say thank you so much to Eric and Joe for being here again. Really appreciate it, and I will probably see you all Thursday morning. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, I lost track of my agenda. Lisa, if you have it in front of you.
Yes, we have a recommended motion in the agenda,
Thank you.
which I can make, because I have it here. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors direct the Township Manager to provide the board's comments to the Executive Director of COG.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Yeah, this is, I can hand off and back to you with you, but in the middle of it, I'm not sure. Any further discussion? That's where we are. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. Lisa, I'm sorry, I'm really struggling with my voice. Do you mind taking over right now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
You held in there, you hung in there, so nice, thank you for that. Okay, so we will move on now to new business. Up first is the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda and acceptance of the treasurer's report.
So moved. This is Patty, so moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Any comment? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. Up next, we have a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, adopting and approving an amendment to the Articles of Incorporation of the Center Area Transportation Authority as proposed by resolution of the Board of said authority, setting forth the proposed amendment and authorizing said authority and proper officers of the authority to execute, verify, and file appropriate articles of amendment. And this will be presented by James Progar, Assistant Township Manager.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Articles of Incorporation under which CATA was organized as a municipal authority were approved by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on May 17, 1974. The Municipal Authorities Act sets a maximum term of existence of 50 years. An amendment to CATA's Articles of Incorporation is necessary to extend the life of the authority beyond 2024, because amending the articles is a multi-step process requiring action on the part of all member municipalities. The process is being now. It should be noted that this action is an administrative formality at the state level to continue CATA's existence and has no impact on ongoing discussions of local match shares.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for any comment on this item. Seeing no public comment, I'll close the public hearing and I will go ahead and ask for a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution as proposed.
Is there a second?
This is Jeremy. I will second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Strickland. This is a resolution 2022-26. Ms. Stevens?
Yes?
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Deneni?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Thank you, James. Okay, up next, we have recognition of service of Fire Chief Steve Bear. Ms. Martin.
Thank you. So this evening, the Board of Supervisors is being asked to recognize Mr. Steve Bear. He is currently serving as our fire director for the Center Region Council of Governments. and he is soon retiring. So staff has prepared a plaque to present to, excuse me, not a plaque, but there, thank you, a certificate of appreciation that we will present on behalf of the Board of Supervisors to Mr. Bear. So we are just asking that you recognize Mr. Steve Bear's service and contributions to the community, serving not just as the fire director, but also as the fire chief, being responsible for Alpha Fire Company, the Center Region Fire Marshal's Office, and the Center Region Emergency Management.
Thanks very much. Anyone care to make any comments?
Well, I would love to. I really wanted to thank Director Bear for his service. He and I are homies. He's from my hometown area, so we have that, shared those similar roots. And he really taught me a lot about public safety generally and program management. And I cannot end this without saying his dashboard for the plan that we did to monitor the progress of implementation is just a really wonderful, transparent tool for accountability and keeping us on task. And I just thank him for all of his service and everything that he's done for the region.
Same. He has, his wealth of knowledge will be missed. I learn something every time I'm in a meeting with him. And I know he's so highly respected, not just in our area, but all around the state at least. So much appreciation, and thank you for putting this together for him. That's great. Okay, and we don't need any type of motion for that. Okay, so up next we'll move to award of contract 2022-C19. It's the Ferguson Township Public Works Building 3 roof replacement, and we'll go to Mr. Modricker.
Good evening. I'd like to turn your attention to a draft letter in your packet dated November 15th to JB Roofing, and also a memorandum in your packet dated November 8th regarding contract 2022-C19 Public Works Building 3 roof replacement, withdrawal of award to JB Roofing, award to Mid-State Roofing and Coating, Inc. On September 6th, we opened bids for a roof replacement contract and awarded the bid to the low bidder. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons that are outlined in the memorandum and in the draft letter, the contractor has not been responsive. And I am recommending that the Board of Supervisors withdraw the award of contract 2022-C19 Public Works Building 3 roof replacement to Jeffrey S. Bickle, doing business as JB Roofing, in the amount of $24,336, and award the contract to Mid-State Roofing and Coating, Inc. in the amount of $46,443.
Much. Would anyone care to make the motion?
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors withdraw the motion and from JB Roofing and award it to, who was that? Mid-State, as just presented by Dave Modricker.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is communications to the board. Does anyone have anything to share? I'm seeing none. Okay. Then we can go to calendar items. We have Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee, Tree Commission, offices closed on November 24th and 25th. Park and Rec Committee and Planning Commission, all outlined. Anything else to add? No?
Oh, I'm sorry, can I ask a question, Vice Chair?
Certainly.
Thank you. I saw the Park and Recreation Committee meeting, and it reminded me, how's the RPOS plan coming? You don't have to go into it. Will we get a presentation soon, or, I'm excited about it. And if you don't have an update, that's okay.
I can give a very general update, just that the last communication update that I had via email from the project manager is that they were drafting the chapters. So we are moving into that stage where there are several chapters that are currently being drafted. And I believe there'll be an update coming to the board, possibly not December, it may be January, but we are now rounding in and we're moving toward the tail end of the project. So I'll have specific updates for you in the RPOS plan update presented by Ms. Tracy Strickland, who's the project manager, when she's here in front of the board.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that update. Okay, is there anything else? And if there is nothing, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And
So moved.
And we're adjourned. Good night. Thanks all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night, Dave.